The year was 1337. Tensions between England and France had been simmering for decades, their histories intertwined through bloodlines, marriages, and territorial claims. King Edward III of England stood at a precipice. His claim to the French throne, through his mother Isabella, the daughter of King Philip IV of France, had been dismissed by the French court in favor of Philip VI, the first of the Valois dynasty. What began as a diplomatic slight soon escalated into a conflict that would span generations, reshaping the destinies of both kingdoms. Edward III was not a man to be ignored. Charismatic and ambitious, he saw the French crown not only as his birthright, but as a means to solidify his legacy. England, a comparatively small kingdom, relied heavily on trade, particularly in wool and wine. Much of this trade passed through French territories, especially Gascony, a region of immense economic importance to England. French attempts to assert control over Gascony were viewed as provocations, threats to England's prosperity and sovereignty. When Philip VI confiscated the duchy in 1337, Edward declared war. The conflict began with measured skirmishes and calculated raids. Edward's forces conducted chevauchées, devastating French towns and countryside, sowing chaos and weakening the enemy's morale. These raids were brutal, sparing neither peasants nor nobility. Fields were torched, livestock slaughtered, and villages left in ruin. For Edward, this strategy was twofold: to cripple France's economy and to demonstrate England's resolve. In 1346, Edward launched a bold campaign into northern France. His forces, though smaller than the French army, were disciplined and well-equipped. The English longbow, a devastating weapon capable of piercing armor at great distances, became the linchpin of Edward's strategy. At the Battle of Crécy, the English army faced a much larger French force. French knights, armored and confident in their superior numbers, charged repeatedly at the English lines. But the longbowmen, stationed on a hill, unleashed a torrent of arrows that decimated the French ranks. By nightfall, the battlefield was littered with the dead, and England claimed a resounding victory. This triumph emboldened Edward. His forces marched south, laying siege to Calais. The siege lasted a year, with the citizens of Calais enduring starvation and disease. When the city finally fell in 1347, Edward expelled most of its inhabitants, replacing them with English settlers. Calais would remain a vital foothold for England on the continent for over 2 centuries. But war is rarely straightforward. Even as Edward celebrated his victories, his kingdom faced its own challenges. The Black Death swept through Europe in 1347, killing millions and destabilizing societies. England was not spared. Entire villages were abandoned as the plague ravaged the population. The war slowed as both sides grappled with the devastation. But the seeds of conflict had already taken root too deeply to be abandoned. Edward's son, the Black Prince, emerged as a key figure in the war's next phase. In 1356, at the Battle of Poitiers, he led an English force against King John II of France. Outnumbered and surrounded, the Black Prince used cunning tactics to exploit the terrain and the discipline of his troops. The French were routed, and King John was captured, a blow that humiliated France and forced it into a precarious truce. The Treaty of Bretigny in 1360 marked a high point for England. Edward relinquished his claim to the French throne in exchange for expanded territories in Aquitaine and a hefty ransom for the captured king. But the peace was short-lived. France, under the leadership of Charles V, began to recover. Charles, a shrewd and methodical ruler, avoided direct confrontations, relying instead on attrition and guerrilla tactics. The French gradually reclaimed lost territories, and England's hold on the continent began to weaken. As the war dragged into its later stages, it became increasingly clear that neither side could achieve total victory. The conflict drained resources and strained societies. In England, The cost of war led to heavy taxation, fueling discontent among the populace. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 was a stark reminder of the domestic challenges England faced. Although the rebellion was suppressed, it underscored the growing divide between the ruling elite and the common people. By the early 15th century, a new chapter of the war unfolded. Henry V ascended to the English throne in 1413, bringing renewed vigor and ambition. Henry was determined to revive England's fortunes in France. In 1415, he launched an audacious campaign, culminating in the legendary Battle of Agincourt. Facing a numerically superior French force, Henry's army relied on the longbow and the muddy terrain to neutralize the advantage of the French knights. The battle was a slaughter, with thousands of French soldiers killed or captured. Agincourt cemented Henry's reputation as one of England's greatest warrior kings. Henry's victories led to the Treaty of Troyes in 1420. The treaty was a remarkable achievement for England, recognizing Henry as the heir to the French throne and marrying him to Catherine of Valois, the daughter of Charles VI. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the war might finally bring England dominance over France. But Henry's untimely death in 1422 shattered these hopes. His infant son, Henry VI, inherited both the English and French crowns, but his weak and indecisive leadership would prove disastrous. France, meanwhile, found a savior in Joan of Arc. A peasant girl claiming divine inspiration, Joan galvanized French resistance. In 1429, she led the French army to a decisive victory at the Siege of Orleans, reversing the tide of the war. Her capture by the English and subsequent execution in 1431 only strengthened her legend and the resolve of the French people. The final years of the war saw England's fortunes decline further. Internal conflicts, including the Wars of the Roses, diverted attention and resources. The French, now unified and strengthened under Charles VII, systematically reclaimed territories. The Battle of Castillon in 1453 marked the end of the war, with France securing victory and driving the English out of all continental holdings except Calais. The 100 Years' War left a profound legacy. For England, it marked the decline of feudalism and the rise of a more centralized monarchy. The war also fostered a stronger sense of national identity, as English culture and language began to emerge distinct from French influence. For France, the war solidified the Valois dynasty's hold on power and set the stage for a period of recovery and cultural flourishing. Through triumph and tragedy, England's unyielding fight in the 100 Years' War remains a testament to its resilience and ambition. It was a conflict that reshaped nations, forging the modern identities of both England and France. The 100 Years' War was not merely a conflict of kings and claims. It was a crucible that tested the resilience and endurance of nations. For the people of England and France, it was a period of relentless struggle, where the boundaries of loyalty, identity, and survival were constantly redrawn. The toll of the war was not limited to the battlefield. It seeped into the lives of ordinary people, transforming societies in profound and often devastating ways. In England, the war's demands were felt in every corner of society. Taxes increased to fund the campaigns, placing a heavy burden on peasants and merchants alike. These taxes, often viewed as unjust, sparked discontent that occasionally boiled over into rebellion. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381, while primarily fueled by domestic grievances, was also a response to the economic pressures of the war. While the rebellion was crushed, it highlighted the growing divide between the ruling classes and the common people. In France, the devastation was even more pronounced. The chevauchées conducted by English forces left a trail of destruction across the countryside. Villages were burned, crops destroyed, and livestock stolen. For French peasants, survival often meant fleeing their homes or taking up arms themselves. The presence of marauding bands of mercenaries, known as routiers, added to the chaos, as these soldiers for hire pillaged the land when their employers could no longer pay them. The fabric of rural life, already fragile, was torn apart by the relentless demands of war. Amid the turmoil, stories of resilience and adaptation emerged. In both England and France, women played crucial roles in maintaining the home front. They managed farms, defended villages, and even served as spies and informants. In some cases, women directly participated in combat, defying traditional gender roles in acts of extraordinary bravery. These contributions, often overlooked, were vital to the survival of their communities. The war also brought about significant changes in the nature of warfare itself. The introduction of the longbow gave the English a decisive advantage in many battles, allowing them to strike from a distance and neutralize the heavily armored knights who had dominated medieval battlefields for centuries. The success of the longbow at Crécy and Agincourt demonstrated that disciplined infantry could defeat mounted knights, signaling the decline of feudal chivalry. In response, the French began to adapt, incorporating artillery and professional standing armies into their military strategy. As the conflict dragged on, the line between war and politics blurred. Alliances shifted, and loyalties were tested. The Burgundian faction, initially aligned with England, played a pivotal role in shaping the war's outcome. Their betrayal of Joan of Arc to the English was a moment of infamy, but their eventual reconciliation with the French crown marked a turning point in the war. The political intrigue and maneuvering that defined this period were as crucial to the war's outcome as any battle. Joan of Arc's role in the 100 Years' War remains one of its most compelling chapters. Her rise from an illiterate peasant girl to a national hero and military leader is a testament to the power of conviction and faith. Her victories at Orleans and subsequent campaigns revitalized the French cause, inspiring a demoralized nation to fight back against the English. Even in her capture and execution, Joan's legacy endured. She became a symbol of French resilience and a rallying point for future generations. For England, the loss of the war marked the end of an era. The territorial ambitions that had defined English foreign policy for centuries were curtailed, and the nation turned inward to address its internal challenges. The Wars of the Roses, a series of dynastic conflicts that erupted in the aftermath of the 100 Years' War, consumed England for decades. These wars further weakened the monarchy and altered the course of English history. In France, the war's conclusion brought a sense of unity and renewal. The Valois dynasty emerged stronger, consolidating power and rebuilding a nation devastated by years of conflict. The recovery was slow but transformative, laying the groundwork for the Renaissance in France. The centralized monarchy that emerged in the wake of the war would go on to shape the country's destiny for centuries to come. The 100 Years' War was a period of immense suffering and upheaval, but it was also a time of remarkable change. It tested the limits of endurance and innovation, forcing both England and France to adapt and evolve. The legacy of the war is evident not only in the political and territorial shifts it brought about, but also in the cultural and social transformations it inspired. The stories of heroism, sacrifice, and perseverance that emerged from the war continue to resonate, offering lessons in resilience and the enduring human spirit. As the war came to an end in 1453, it left behind a landscape forever altered. The scars of battle were etched into the countryside, but so too were the seeds of renewal. For England, the loss was a humbling reminder of the limits of ambition. For France, the victory was a hard-fought triumph that paved the way for a new era of prosperity. Through it all, the people of both nations endured, proving that even in the darkest times, hope and resilience can prevail.